So now when something comes up that's new, that's outside of my capability and confidence, the fear doesn't mean no. The fear just tells me that I currently do not have the capability and confidence. And in this time period, can I develop, accrue that capability and confidence? And if so, commit, find the courage, and go for it. And so he calls it the 4 C's: commit, courage, capability, confidence. I call it the 5 C's. You have a challenge, commit to it, find that courage, develop the capability, and you'll have confidence and you can do it. And what I realized through all my life, all the things that I did that worked out well, I had to commit. And the things that I didn't do is because I didn't commit.
You're listening to the Brave OT podcast with me, Carlin Neek. This podcast is all about empowering occupational therapists to step up, level up, blaze some trails, and maybe engage in a little conscious rebellion in service of our profession, our clients, our work, our businesses, and living our mission wholeheartedly. We are all about keeping it real, doing hard things, unhustling, being curious, exploring, growing through our challenges, and finding joy, fulfillment, and vitality as we do so. Really, we're OTing ourselves and each other. I hope you love this episode. Today, I'm talking with Dr. Lorne Brown, a traditional Chinese medicine doctor who has built a thriving, multifaceted business through some of what might seem like counterintuitive business processes and personal growth. We're diving deep into the mindset shifts that separate those who stay stuck from those who move forward despite their fears, and maybe how you could shift from being one to being the other. You'll hear why you need to commit before you feel confident, how to reframe rejection as valuable information, and what it really means to think like an entrepreneur in healthcare. Lorne talks about his 4 or 5 C's framework for moving through scary ventures and reveals the inner work that transforms practitioners from tentative to unstoppable. I talk about this all the time, and I like the nuance he brings and the spirituality he brings to it too. So if you've been waiting for the perfect moment or are convinced you need more credentials before you make your next move, this conversation will give you a completely different framework for moving through uncertainty and into action. This episode is brought to you by Jane, a clinic management software built to help you focus on what matters most, your clients. Building rapport with your clients is important during appointments, and that can be challenging when you're also trying to take timely and detailed documentation. That's why Jane built AI Scribe to help you document important information without manual note taking. The feature transforms your session recordings into chart entries, and all you have to do is review your notes, sign the chart, and you're done. And since security is top priority at Jane, AI Scribe was built securely in-house to be fully HIPAA and PIPEDA compliant. With a tool you can trust, Jane helps you spend more time on your client care. I'll share a blog article in the show notes that I recently wrote about how I've adapted my AI Scribe note template to really reflect OT processes and ways of thinking about the session. And I have to say, my chart notes are actually better now than they were before I was using AI Scribe. To learn more about how Jane can help change how you feel about documentation, head to meet.jane.app/documentation to book a demo or sign up. Make sure when you do sign up, you use the code VITALITY for a 1-month grace period on your new account as a Brave OT listener. Lorne, welcome to the Brave OT podcast. I was really honored when you asked if you could be on the podcast.
Yeah, well, my reasoning was I wanted to continue the conversation we had that you did on healthy seminars on Brave Enough to Grow, and you shared so many concepts that I have also discovered, but not through the way you did. And I loved the synergy. And really it was like, can we talk more? And because I've been doing this long enough, I usually find these conversations people want to listen to. So I said, hey, why don't we continue this on your podcast? Because if you think it's good, share with your audience. If not, you can hit the trash can. But we don't know where this is going to go. But I already knew there was so much synergy, and I wanted to unpack more of what you were already discussing on the event I had with you.
So that event, it was because we're both connected to Jane, and Jane does such a beautiful job of creating community and bringing people together that have some overlap. So when they said, hey, can you talk on these healthy seminars thing? I was like, sure. Yeah. I went looking and I'm like, it's not my usual audience, but what could I offer? And talk to your team, talk to you, and was excited to think, yeah, I could talk. There's lots of acupuncturists and Chinese medicine practitioners and people who are doing these wellness approaches. And I felt really aligned with that and thought, well, okay, yeah, let's give that a go. But when we were in the seminar, I talked about entrepreneurial mindset, bringing acceptance and commitment therapy into doing brave things and all of the places we get stuck as practitioners who are trying to do entrepreneurial things. And at the end, I thought, okay, well, he'll say, thank you, that was really great. And away we go. But the way you started engaging and discussing the nuance and overlaps and extending a lot of these concepts I was presenting to some of the roots that I know exist in ancient practices, in world religions, in in Buddhism and Hinduism and all of these things. And you were like, yeah, this all connects. I'm like, oh, he's really listening.
Yeah, I've been criticized in a good way for listening when people like yourself teach, because I want to learn. I love to learn, and that's been part of my, when people say the success that I've enjoyed is my thirst and desire to learn. And you shared so much, and it was so good. I tell people, I'm telling your audience, like, dig in. Carolyn's the real deal. She's got some good material to share that can transform lives for sure.
Oh, thank you. Now, to frame your connection for the audience, most of my listeners are occupational therapists, and you are not. And I would love to hear what your background is, what you do, so that we can ground you in where you're coming from.
Yeah, I'm going to give you some of my credentials and
Sure.
my experience, so maybe why they would want to listen to us chat today.
Okay.
I have a degree, a Bachelor of Science in Math. I have from Western McGill. We're both Canadians. I did accounting at McGill. Then I became a chartered accountant, now known as a CPA. And then I was a controller for the ocean spray growers in BC for a while. And my passion was always in health. And that's when I was doing my Bachelor of Science in Math, that's where I thought I would go. But I got sidetracked.
Decided to geek out on math a little bit. Yeah.
I was an auditor for a while, a controller. And I ended up going back to school to train as a doctor of traditional Chinese medicine. And then the medicine had so much about mind-body connection, but I thought we were kind of trained as barefoot doctors, and we lost the spiritual side of the medicine that once existed. And so I went and trained to become a clinical hypnotherapist, and I've done other training in those types of energy psychology programs, other types of hypnosis type programs or energy psychology. And then kept on learning and going back into the roots of classical Chinese medicine, where the spirit lives as well in the medicine. And practice-wise, I have a clinic called AccuBalance Wellness Center. We're quite known for fertility. I think we were the first, or one of the first clinics, if not in Canada, definitely in British Columbia, that focused on reproductive health. And we were the ones that got IVF acupuncture on site in the Vancouver IVF clinics. That was me back in 2002. They used to shove me out the door, and I'd have to pretend I was the partner of the woman receiving the embryo so I could be there to do the acupuncture. And persistence prevailed and we're the exclusive clinic that goes on site at one of the largest clinics in Canada at Olive Fertility now. And we have rooms there. It's different, fully integrated now compared to back in early 2000. And I created the Integrated Fertility Symposium, which sold out for 5 years until COVID shut us down. And I run Healthy Seminars, which is an online educational platform for health professionals. Most of the courses are naturopathic medicine and Chinese medicine and some functional medicine. That's my over 25 plus years of history in a minute, I think.
That is really an interesting journey. And I love that your curiosity is evident, right? Where you head down this path and think it's going to be this and detour here because that's really interesting and have some curiosity there. And I love that part too, where you persisted, where it sounds like the fertility clinics did not want you to come in and do acupuncture while the woman was having her embryo transfer, and that you thought, let's figure it out. We can find a way. And there's some tenacity, resilience in, clearly you weren't just doing that to be in control or anything. Like, you knew this was making a difference and this was for the good of the person. So you took these brave steps to do something a bit bold in that process.
Yeah, I saw value in it. I saw value in it. The research was there. I started in practice in 2000. In 2002 is when I got into reproductive health focus. I was seeing everything as of 2000. Sorry, 2002 is when the research came out for IVF and acupuncture. And it was 2004 that I focused my practice on reproductive health. But it was in 2002 when I started to get to clinics on site for IVF acupuncture where they would throw me out, like literally sometimes throw me out.
Gosh.
And I did have persistence, and
Mhm.
because of the value, I believed in it, right? I saw the
Yeah.
value, I believed in it, and no wasn't an answer. And so when I got no, how I perceived it, my mindset, no basically meant that I was not educating properly the value and benefit for the IVF clinic and the patient. Like all it was feedback that I haven't communicated the benefit because I got it. I knew
Yeah.
it. And I knew they didn't get it because they're like, no. And every time I would go and talk to the IVF clinics back in the early days, they go bring the research. There was one study back then, right? And years would go by, bring the research. And eventually there was more research. But even when there was more research, they said no. So I started realizing the bring the research really was their way of saying no because there was no research. And once I had the information they wanted, they still said no. And then it dawned on me thinking what I thought was valuable in the patient, but I wasn't getting into the mind of the directors at the IVF clinic, what was valuable for them. And so they didn't believe that acupuncture could improve the fertility. That's why they didn't really care to have it. But you know what they did want that I figured out over questioning and taking them out for lunches and doing lunch and learns is they wanted their patients to have a positive experience and be relaxed was key.
Because that affects outcome.
And it affects take home babies the correct way. What the research had come out that a lot of people dropped out of IVF, not because of the financial strain that we hear so much about, but because of the stress of the journey that
Mm.
they don't do any more cycles. And it's not a one cycle done process. Some people need 3 or more
Yeah.
transfers to get that take home baby. And so if they quit after the first or second and they did that third or fourth, they might have gotten the baby. And so they realized that the patients that were doing acupuncture were staying in care longer than the patients who were not. And they
Right.
could tell in their waiting room who was having acupuncture versus who was not.
Wow.
And so that was the way I reached them is it also became competitive. IVF clinics are competitive in the cities. It's a private medicine in Canada. So for our Canadian listeners, everything medicine social usually free. IVF is not, the testing is, but the treatments are not. And because it was competitive, they realized that we were an incredible referral source because we were doing acupuncture, herbal, diet, mind, body, lifestyle, low level laser therapy. But we couldn't do the ultrasounds of the ovaries or the uterus. We weren't doing the medications like ovulation drugs, Clomid, because some will need Clomid, letrozole, some will need IVF.
Right.
And so they realized we were a better referral source than the medical doctors.
Naturally. Yes.
And we were more educated for reproductive health because we had a better sense when they need to see the IVF doctor, not waiting because of time or a tubal issue to get things moving forward. So that's how we got welcomed into their clinics is they saw us as a great referral source. So it made them competitive. Patients wanted the acupuncture, they wanted integration. We could help send them more patients, referrals,
Yeah.
and the patients seemed to have a more positive, more relaxed experience and stayed in care to get that take home baby. That's why they brought us in, not because they thought it was actually helping improve IVF success rate. At the time, they're like, come on, putting needles in the ankle and the hands, and how's that going to improve? Now
Right.
there's more and more studies through the acupuncture, herbal, and low-level laser therapy, improving egg and sperm quality, improving uterine receptivity. So we're seeing that was back 25 years ago. We've
Yeah.
got more data to support that. But back then, that's not why. They weren't doing it because they thought we were helping increase pregnancy rates. They were doing it because of stress reduction, better referrals, and patients weren't dropping out of IVF before the take home baby.
There are so many good takeaways from that. So I'm thinking about the occupational therapist listening who may have a business and is thinking, like I hear it all the time, how do you get referrals? And so a challenge we have as OTs that I think there are some parallels with a lot of the practitioners you support is that people kind of don't get what we do. And occupational therapists have quite a breadth of types of things we could do, types of people we could help, which makes it really hard to define our impact. And so, let's say, for instance, somebody who is I have a client who's specializing in working with moms and babies. So in this postpartum perinatal phase, she can support with stuff around breastfeeding and milestones and sleep and positioning, and the mom with her mental health and any postpartum depression, or even just how she's coping with adjusting to this new role and new routines and not sleeping, and supporting that period from that really function focused, but also a healthcare provider who can understand how these roles and occupational roles as a mom, the occupation of being a mom, and adjusting to that with a newborn. And maybe you have other kids, or maybe your child has special needs. And this occupational therapist could be a one stop shop that would actually come to you, for instance. Brilliant idea this client has. And one of the things we've been talking about is how do you get out there to the people who might refer to you? And I think it's an interesting thing that I'm seeing among practitioners is sometimes marketing to the doctors less in a here's my brochure and services, and more in a hey, I've been supporting your client with this. So almost a little progress note that's a friendly thing that really is the doctor didn't request a note. The client gave consent to provide a communication, but it doesn't really need a report. But the fact that you might document an outcome so that doctor goes, oh, there's somebody who does all that. That's cool. And being able to, instead of, hey, look how good I am, prove it. And this is what I'm hearing in your story too. You're proving the outcomes rather than you were pitching them, but it wasn't resonating in a way that proving that this is working, and actually helping the doctor find their motivation in the proof, because often we're trying to guess at what they want to hear from us, and often the thing that's compelling might not be the thing that the angle we're trying to take in illustrating our offer.
Yeah, and I'll unpack this on a few things you mentioned around that. One is I don't identify myself as an acupuncturist. Maybe that's why I've been successful as well. And so what I share and what you share, in my opinion, doesn't mean OT, acupuncture, naturopath. It does not matter. Actually, it helped me because when I trained as a chartered accountant, we used to, in our case studies, they'd call them widgets. If you had a product, widgets meaning it doesn't matter what the product is, just call it a widget because it's all the same. You may be selling apples, this person's selling oranges, this person's selling vacuum cleaners. The accounting's the same, right? Here it's the same thing, process. So if you're looking for referrals, it's about relationships. People want to
Yeah.
do relationships. And so it's dating. And if you think you're going to meet them once and they're going to refer to you, those expectations are probably not realistic. And take a line from the drug companies, pharmaceutical companies. They send the drug reps that they're used to the doctor's office once a month, out of sight, out of mind. So developing a relationship is getting to know them. So you find out what their sore points are. Like I remember early on when I was treating lots of different things, I went to a medical doctor, create awareness. So you're meeting them, right? Introduce myself. And the question was like, what's the most difficult patient you have? What's the patient when you look at your schedule, you go, oh, and he goes, oh, the ones that come in with a whole list of symptoms because I only have a short period of time and they come in with a piece of paper, literally, and they have a whole list of symptoms. And I said, well, that's amazing because I'm a holistic doctor. So I treat people with a whole list of symptoms.
Yeah. I want to know how all the pieces on the list fit together.
And he didn't want those patients
No.
because it threw his schedule off. And
Yeah.
it was just too much for a lot of doctors now say you got 3 symptoms and then book more appointments. So back then, he was happy to unload those patients to me. And Chinese medicine is really great at treating chronic conditions. So
Yeah.
I found out, what that person, so I just asked, you never know what it is. And I started learning what they wanted. So when I used to do rounds for the fertility clinics, they started off with how acupuncture can improve pregnancy outcomes. And that actually upset them because they thought they're good enough and they don't need support and don't tell us something sticking needles in the body is going to help. I think they were insulted by it.
Threatening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't threatening. No, I think it
No.
was like, this is taking advantage of patients. This is BS. I just think they're like,
Mhm.
no way. The materialistic model, there was no evidence. And if there's no evidence, it can't work, which is wrong. No evidence means there's no evidence. It doesn't mean it doesn't work. It doesn't start working after you have evidence. The evidence goes, it's been working, and we have data to show it's been working, but it's always been working. We just have the data to also support what you're claiming. With the docs, you're getting to know them. And when I did the rounds, they didn't, it's about creating a relationship and getting them to know you. So I started finding out what do the nurses want? And they were struggling with burnout and weight gain. So rather than doing talks on fertility, I started doing talks for the nurses on how to prevent or replenish from burnout, eating and treatments for weight loss, natural treatments, and other things that they wanted. And I would try to do these a couple times a year. And let's say I do 4 a year. One was on fertility, and 3 were on things they really want to know. Because we are treating
Interesting. Yeah.
fertility, so I want to educate them on this. But again, some people go, "That's not fair." I go, I don't fight with reality. The reality was that's what they wanted to know. And because I do a lot of conscious work hypnosis, then they wanted to know about manifestation stuff. So we started doing talks on manifestation stuff. It for me, it's not like you meet once and it's over. It's dating. It's a relationship. Relationships grow every time you connect. You develop trust and confidence. People want to work with people they have trust and confidence with. So over time, the nurses and doctors developed trust and confidence with me, and the referrals grew over time. So I'm 25 years in, and I have really good referrals back and forth, but it didn't happen in 1 week or in 1 month. And you said something about the letter. Actually, doctors are trained that when you see somebody mutual, you send a letter. So it's not out of the ordinary to send a doctor a letter saying, I'm seeing a mutual patient. Here's what I'm doing. Here's what, giving them feedback. Legally, I believe they have to put it in their chart once you send a letter to them about a patient they're seeing. And two, it's a way for them to know you exist because you can't get a referral if they don't know you exist. And the professionalism leaves a nice impression on them. And it's
Yeah.
good medicine for your patient as well.
Yeah. Good collaboration. Then the doctor can ask about it. And I'm curious in your story, I really enjoy the way you met them where they are and then followed up with what they need to get that sort of buy-in that I'm a resource, I'm helpful. I'm curious how you got in the door in the first place.
I said I don't take no when in this context as an answer unless they say no and don't ever come back. Um, then I listen. But if they say no, I just say, okay, how can I reach them? And so I just kept on coming back. And what ended up happening is one of the senior docs there wanted to finally meet me, and I come into his office and he says, "Do you know why I wanted to meet with you?" And I said, "Yeah, you want to know how acupuncture can improve your IVF success rates at your clinic?" And he goes, "No, I don't believe in that stuff." I go, "Then why am I here?" And he says, "I needed to understand how somebody could be a chartered accountant and then go and become an acupuncturist."
No way.
Well, it wasn't friendly, right?
Yeah.
But I don't take things personally, less
No.
so even now. And I laugh, meet them where they're at, right?
Yeah.
And the conversation started. And about 10 years after that fact, that same doctor said, I really thought you were a flash in the pan. You were here, a fad, and you're going to be gone, but you have persevered. I'm impressed. Right. Then a few years after that, they built rooms for us in their clinic. The
Wow.
relationship grew, and we've done talks together, and we've become great friends. But the
Yeah.
first, just to let you guys know, the first rounds I did for their clinic,
Mhm.
I was new to this. I never done medical rounds, and I wasn't aware that it's customary or it's common practice to destroy the person giving the rounds. Like they challenge you and attack you. Could not believe it coming from my medicine. That was not the approach we had. And they destroyed me. It was humiliating how they could just chew apart the study and everything, right? And a year or two later, one of those nurses was at a different IVF clinic, and we started at one, and we ended up being the acupuncture on site at all the clinics at one point in time. And then it's so busy with this one clinic, we only go on site for one clinic now at Olive. But at this other clinic, one of the nurses who was back at the rounds a few years earlier, she goes, "Oh, Lauren, hi, nice to see you." She goes, "I keep thinking about that day you did rounds. That was so embarrassing." So I persevered. And just to let you know, it wasn't like it was all easy. I did have to have some effort, and I had to develop resilience to do it, right? But I want to emphasize to your audience what we share, whether it's an acupuncturist, a naturopath, an OT, or some other thing, it doesn't matter what your profession is. I don't identify as an acupuncturist, meaning my patients don't care that I do acupuncture. They are looking for a solution to their problem. If I
Mm.
told them drinking orange juice on one foot and going in circles would help them get pregnant, they're going to jump on one foot and drink orange juice if I have some anecdotal or research to prove that.
Right.
And so that was the biggest part is so many of us treat what we do as dogmatic, right? So
Mhm.
you got to get into the patient. So, the postpartum idea that you shared, what entrepreneurs, which health professionals are entrepreneurs. What, to me, the definition, to use a loose definition, is somebody who creates value for somebody else, right? Who feels a need. That's an
Yeah.
entrepreneurial spirit, right? Being of
Yeah.
service and value to somebody else. And so if you can start thinking what that is, you have many tools. So I trained in Chinese medicine. I'm developed low-level laser therapy for fertility in my practice, but that wasn't part of my original training. I had to go and do additional training and then buy this equipment. I went and trained. I kept an adding modality. So my license that I get to bill under, and I do, is acupuncture, but I kept on adding things because I wanted to use any tools that I can that are allowed in my scope
Sure.
to support, right? And so nutrition, diet, mind, body, lifestyle, all that stuff is important for health. And so I don't think, oh, I'm an acupuncturist, which allows me to look at many different things that I can do to help be the solution for this individual or group. And when you are the solution, they find you and refer to you and come to you.
So instead of saying, I'm an acupuncturist, you say, hey, I'm Lorne.
Well, if you have a focus, I focus on reproductive health, if that's what you do. For that individual, I help moms in the postpartum period, right? Because that's when you're looking for something, you don't know that thing when it comes to OT or acupuncture solutions. So you're not going to look for it. So for 2025, when we're recording this, a little different than 2000 or 2002, to be realistic. In 2002, acupuncture for fertility was not a known thing. Acupuncture for pain and other things, but fertility, absolutely not a known thing in the public. It's something that Chinese medicine treats. It's in our textbooks and we're trained, but it wasn't a public thing. So somebody who's looking to have IVF success, supported, or to conceive naturally, or they have PCOS, the endometriosis, they're not going to go back in the day when I was young, Yellow Pages, or today, whatever, Google. They're not going to go look up acupuncture because they don't know acupuncture is a solution.
Yeah.
They are going to look for things to improve their fertility, what to do after a failed IVF cycle. And then they'll see some of the things that are out there. So you got to get out of yourself and get into the patient's head. And so the patient doesn't care that you're an OT.
They don't. They're not searching for us either. Yeah, exactly. That's it.
So you got to let them know and so that's where the niche part can be important. The niche as in what you're putting out there, what you're educating. If you want to use the word marketing, some people don't like that word. It can be a trigger, but marketing is just educating people what you do with integrity, right? If what you do has integrity and you have integrity, your marketing can have integrity. And I did reproductive health, fertility, but I still treat generally. I don't treat like Chinese medicine can't just treat the ovaries. So when somebody came in with fertility, although that was what I put out there, that's my focus. And I had ways to show them. I became a member of the ABORM, a fellow of the ABORM. So that's somebody whose focuses in reproductive health. I went and wrote their exam, and all my continuing education was in that area. I did focus in that area. But the education part was fertility. But when somebody comes in, I still treat from a Chinese medicine perspective, meaning if they have insomnia, if they have constipation, if they run hot, they run cold, they have psoriasis, I don't just say, we're just going to focus on your ovaries today. We still treat the whole person. It's just that from their perspective, they want to see me because I have a little maybe more knowledge than the general practitioner on fertility. Why? Because I've done extra training in it and I see so much. You can't beat clinical experience, right? And so I was using the Yellow Pages as an example. If I had a fear, a phobia, and I had a fear of heights, and I went to the Yellow Pages and somebody lists phobias: fear of spiders, fear of snakes, fear of ladders, fear of women, fear of men, fear of whatever, rain. And I look and I see one that says, I just treat fear of heights. I'm probably going to choose the one that speaks to me, fear of heights, because when you treat everything, all of a sudden you're no longer a specialist, you're a generalist. You can't be a master of everything. And so you got to put out there maybe one is the best, three max things that you want to treat and you think you treat well, and then they will find you. And then inside you can educate them. You do this. We do so much perimenopause and menopause in my clinic, but it wasn't something that we put out there in the early days.
People usually are afraid that means that they'll turn away the majority of the people and then not get clients if they narrow too much. That's the logic that people have.
Counterintuitive. It is
Yeah,
counterintuitive.
it
What
is.
happens? Yeah, but it's not what happens in reality. And
Yeah.
if success was based on logic, we'd all be successful, right? So let's just say that what we think how it should be, it would be, is not almost never how it is. Otherwise, we'd all be just booming and loving it. So
Yeah.
it is counterintuitive. And when I became focused on fertility, my practice grew insanely that I had to start hiring associates where I have 7 associates, right? I couldn't see. I started turning. So at the beginning, my focus was fertility. People were still coming for different things. I got so busy with fertility that I did turn away other things and refer them to my colleagues
Yeah.
because I couldn't handle the volume I had. And then I started bringing on associates as well because of the busyness. So it is counterintuitive, but when you have a niche, then people will come to you. You got to find out a niche. I treat pain. That's not a niche. But if you're like, I just do knee pain, you would be busy. Or I just do neck pain, you would be so busy. So
I find too, like we often need, in order to find that niche, sometimes we need to cast a wider net, start to see where the trends are, where the interests are, where I really enjoy working. And that it's not like it's hard to come out of the gates and be like, I am a specialist in this one thing.
First of all, I didn't choose fertility. I really got chose by it. So
Right.
when I came into this, I thought my focus would be on gut health because that's what brought me into the like. Why did I go into Chinese medicine? For my background, science and math, accounting. I had IBS, chronic fatigue, candida. I was struggling and suffering from gut
Yeah.
stuff. And so I was pretty clear that I'm going to be the gut guy. And what ended up happening is mostly women more than men still today come to health professionals and we treat holistically. So we look at the menstrual cycle as part of our history taking. And so I was treating people with IBS and constipation and diarrhea and bloating. Some people had Crohn's and colitis. And they were getting results with their PMS, menstrual pain, spotting was going away. And they told friends. So eventually I became the PMS guy. And then my ad was on women's health, PMS, all that stuff. And a woman found me in the magazine called Common Ground back in the day when everything was paper still, not digital. Digital didn't exist, right? She came to me and said, listen, I've been seeing this Dr. Randine Lewis in Houston, and she's been doing my acupuncture and herbal medicine, and it requires me to come once or twice a week to see her. But I'm in Vancouver and she's in Houston. It's not affordable. She asked me to find somebody in Vancouver who has a specialty or focus treating fertility and supporting people through IVF. And there's nobody that I can find. And you're the closest to it because your ad said women's health and listed out PCOS and PMS and all that stuff. So do you think you could help me? Because I have an upcoming IVF cycle. And I said, maybe, can you tell me what IVF is? So that was in the early 2000s. That was 2001-ish. And I helped her. And Randine became my mentor. She wrote the book for your listeners, if you haven't heard of it, called The Infertility Cure, her first book. She's written many since. And she was my first mentor.
Mm.
And this is how it happened that I helped her and she told other people. And I became interested because I love the endocrine system from a Western perspective, hormonal system, and Chinese medicine. And it became that I was passionate about it. And then it became obvious to me that here's an underserved demographic. Here's a group that are struggling stress-wise. Like the stress with the infertility it's insane. It's like a terminal illness. It is not good. It is really difficult on the individuals and couples.
Yeah.
And there's stuff that we can do to support it, to help improve egg and sperm quality and uterus activity. So I found a demographic that needed support. And I also was fascinated and found it very interesting to understand it from a Western and a Chinese medicine perspective. So it found me.
Yep.
When people ask me what's a niche, most people that get into the healing arts because they're broken in a nice way and we're looking to heal and we've had our experiences. So I got into Chinese medicine because it did wonders for my health. That's why I left. I had that experience. And some people have that experience. But then you just think of things that pediatrics, people do everything for their kids, pets, eczema, like skin conditions. And then obviously if you have superpowers with mood, anxiety, insomnia. So there are certain things that people will do anything and travel. So people get on planes to come to our clinic so they can have our low-level laser and the experience that we have to support them. So it's possible, and you don't have to do it right out the gate. You
Yeah.
can take time. It took me a little over 2 years to figure that out and 4 years to get clear on it. So it was 4 years in before I specialized or became focused in an area.
The little nugget of that phone call from that woman who was phoning because she had an adjacent need to what you were advertising, but she gave you such a gem there in saying, I've been looking high and low and I cannot find anybody in all of Vancouver, which is enormous, that does this. And oh, there's an underserved niche. Like that's worth knowing. Like we don't know these things, right? And an area of interest. And sometimes we're hammering at the thing that, that it seems more commonly that people are interested in or that we think is more important. And so it's interesting too when entrepreneurship being able to identify where there's a gap and see, do you have some skills to fill it? Do you have close enough skills to fill it and learn a little bit more to do that well and
Or develop a
explore?
skill,
Yeah,
develop it and get it.
exactly.
I'm not that smart or that good of a listener because when I hear you saying this, when the aha you got was, oh, there's an underserved demographic, there's a niche. I didn't notice that when she did that. It was only in hindsight where I was like, geez, my whole practice is fertility. I should specialize in fertility. It took me a couple of years to realize this was an area I should focus on.
Yeah.
So it wasn't, I didn't think of it back then. It took me a while, but I'm listen better now and I'm smarter now. And you just said it. So people, if you pay attention, you can see it right away what people need. And the other part, though, is developing the skill set. And I wanted to share this part because it made me think of the talk you did, Brave Enough to Grow. And I have a talk, similar version called, which is why I loved your title, Brave Enough to Fail, right? And because it's about developing competency and a skill set. And so if we can drift a bit,
Yes,
I like to
please.
share a bit on this. And it's around people I've been accused of, you don't have fear, so it's easy for you. You've been successful, you're different, cut from a different cloth. And I was like kind of insulted by that. I was like, what are you talking about? I feel fear all the time. I just pull up courage and move through it, right?
Yeah.
And it reminds me of a book written by a strategic coach, Dan Sullivan. He calls it the 4 C's. You have to commit, you develop your courage, you develop capability, and then you have confidence. And I want to explain what that means. And because I have a personal experience that I had the aha moment with something that happened to me. I've had this happen many times, but it was this event and reading this book that I was like, oh, this is what I'm doing and why it works sometimes. And now that I know the process of brave enough to grow or fail, that I can, when I feel the fear, I don't have to interpret that as a no and retreat, how I can move forward. Because sometimes I would retreat and sometimes I wouldn't until I had this understanding. Now I know how to deal with the fear.
And it's human nature to retreat. Like our nervous system is wired to keep us safe, right? But
Flight, freeze.
yeah, totally. There's just something scary. Our nervous system amplifies the heck out of that and tells us we're actually in danger. So we respond and retreat. However, that's important to know.
Yeah, and there's more to your nervous system. Like I believe there's a spiritual aspect to us. And so there's the ego side of us, and then there's this higher self,
Yeah.
higher of us. And we often sometimes confuse this body as us, identify with our feelings because you're not your thoughts and feelings. So there's a way to grow past that or evolve past that. And that's where I loved what you did in your talk when you talked about, I think it's called the ACT process, which I call the notice, accept, choose again process. But I'll share a story. So I created the Integrative Fertility Symposium and it ran for 5 years and it sold out for 5 years. But you got to have a little history behind this and the fear that came behind this conference. So first of all, I'm running online seminars. I don't teach on them. I just own the platform called Healthy Seminars, bringing experts from around the world doing these online learning. And I was at a conference, and at this AGM meeting, they were talking about how poorly conferences are attended in the States. I was in America for acupuncture conferences. And they had all their reasons and excuses. And somebody said, no offense to you, Lorne, because I was there and people knew me because of I'm visible because I'm the moderator. But I think a lot of it's because there's so much online learning, people aren't coming to conferences. And I sat there and I said, I could see why you would think that. And I think it's because the conferences aren't run well, is why you don't have good participation. And if you did them differently, you'd probably be more successful. And here's how I would run it. And I throw out some ideas and they all poo-pooed it. Said, we've never done it this way. This is how we do it. And I said, but you just said they're not busy. And I said jokingly, I go, I have this idea that I should just run my own conference just to prove you that there's a better way to do it, right?
Yeah.
A few years pass after that meeting, and my friend, the late Ray Rubio, he's passed, a good friend of mine, who started back then it was called the American Board of Oriental Reproductive Medicine. It's had a name change, the Acupuncture and TCM Board of Reproductive Medicine.
Yeah.
And he had this exam. I'm a fellow of this. And he said, I wanted to have a destination exam. He loves Vancouver. He lives in the States. He goes, because they always have the exam once a year. He says, I'd love to have a conference around the exam. Would you be willing to organize a conference, and we would have the exam on one of the days and then the conference would follow? So I said, sure. I said, look, I'll get back to you tomorrow. I just gonna run some numbers, but we're probably good. And my wife used to be, she has a master's of public health and used to be a project manager for the Children's Hospital. So she's really good at being organized and running projections. And I'm an accountant in the past life. So I said, this is how I want to do this conference. Run my numbers. She runs the numbers and I'm like, this can't be right. Like, it was stupid. It was expensive.
Yeah.
And I go, geez, we can't do this. She goes, really? I go, yeah, if this fails, we would have to downsize. We'd probably have to sell our house. This is risky. She goes, what are you going to tell Ray? I go, I'm going to tell Ray I'm not going to do this. I goes, okay. So anyways, a couple hours go later and she goes, how was your conversation with Ray? Ray's really persuasive. I also doesn't know for an answer. He was quite upset with me that I wanted to not do it after he told people we're doing it.
Right.
And so I decided to go, hell with it. We're going to do it. So my wife goes, what are you talking about? You just said that we're going to have to sell our house if we downsize. And I said, that's if nobody shows up. It's not like nobody's going to show up, right?
Yep.
And so we commit. And once we commit, we start to work and things start to fall into place. But it is a difficult, stressful 9-month period of planning this because I had no capability or competency on running a conference. So we had to figure everything out, the timing, how we wanted to do it, because I had a way I wanted to do it. So that's not what this conversation is about. There's a way that I thought the conference that make it a great experience for people. By the way, it worked because it sold out 5 years in a row. In a destination conference, right? Americans had to fly. It was an American conference in Canada. So it worked. Right. But we had to figure things out. It was so bad for my team, like stressful, hard, because it was all new and meeting with people, going to other conferences, figuring what they're doing, and things that you don't realize because when you build a house, you got to count for every screw, right? So there's things that you just don't realize you need to know or do to make things work. 2 weeks before the conference, we're sold out. And then I'm going to tell you why this worked, right? Like the brave part. But just to let you know, 2 weeks before the conference sold out, which made it profitable, I told my team that the locations come to me, the hotel location, and I've signed on for another year to do this again next year. Now, remember, people a couple months before were threatening to quit because of the time and the effort that we had to do in this. Because when you don't know something, it takes a lot to rewire that brain and figure things out. Right? And they're like, it was like mute. They're like losing their mind. I go, wait, hear me out. First of all, I need to know if this is a fluke. I need to do it again because we sold out. Yeah. Secondly, we have all these systems in place. We know now. So next year will be enjoyable because we don't have to redo everything. Same place, everything. We'll just change up our speakers and talks. Like we got a formula. Here's the part I want to talk about. I want to break out how brave enough to grow or the brave enough to fail. When I had an opportunity to retreat, fear came up. And I wanted to retreat. And it reminds me of the story of the sailors that go to this island to fight a battle where they're outnumbered 1,000 to 1. And the captain's at the top of the hill facing his men. The men are back to the water where all their boats are. And he tells his men that retreat is not an option. We have victory or we die. And then he points his sword to say, look behind you, mates. And behind them, all the boats are on fire. Retreat is not an option. We win or die. And so what this means about having courage and what Dan Sullivan writes in his book is I feel fear. I was afraid. I had fear. As Dan put it, he wet his pants. You know, you get afraid and you pee your pants. And then what? You go and do it with wet pants anyway. So the first step is to commit. So I said to Ray, fine, we're doing it. We are doing it. So now there's commitment. Once you commit, once you burn the boats, that's the first step. You have to commit. Then from the commitment, you have to bring up the courage. Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is what you find because you have fear. Okay.
If there was no fear, you'd just be doing a thing.
Yeah,
There's
yeah. So the
not
courage
courage at
is,
all.
yeah.
Yeah.
But the courage is focus on why you're doing this. What's the dream? What's the purpose behind it? The passion, the courage. With that courage now, what do? We went and met with conference planners, and we did it all ourselves because we realized their pricing was ridiculous and we could do everything they were kind of talking about. And then my wife being a project manager, she built a whole building here in Vancouver at the Children's Hospital. And myself as an accountant, we just knew we could find every screw that we needed, which we did, right? And we planned it out and we got capability. We developed things. And then from the capability, when you do it and it sells out and it works, you now have confidence. So now it's easier to do it the next time because you now have the capability and confidence. So now you can do it. So now when something comes up that's new, that's outside of my capability and confidence, the fear doesn't mean no. The fear just tells me that I currently do not have the capability and confidence. And in this time period, can I accrue that capability and confidence? And if so, commit, find the courage, and go for it. And so he calls it the 4 C's: commit, courage, capability, confidence. I call it the 5 C's. You have a challenge, commit to it, find that courage, develop the capability, and you'll have confidence and you can do it. And what I realized through all my life, all the things that I did that worked out well, I had to commit. I found the courage, I developed the capabilities, and I had confidence. And the things that I didn't do is because I didn't commit.
And I think there's a wisdom in that selection, right? That not committing doesn't mean you don't care. Sometimes it wasn't and I'm not saying wait for the perfect thing, but when you found a challenge that's worth addressing, that you feel passionate about, that feels values aligned, that feels meaningful, purposeful, that has some really good potential, and you really want to go for that, committing to that. You can't commit to everything, we'd be spread too thin, right? And so having some wisdom in identifying that challenge to commit to. And the part that is so important for our listeners to hear is that sense of developing capability and confidence in the process, because those are the things that often stop people from committing. They don't start because they go, oh, I haven't mastered that yet. So I don't yet have the confidence in that. How the heck are you going to get there without doing the thing? Those things are only byproducts of committing and taking the steps to build the capacity and confidence.
Yeah. And if there's no deadline, then you won't do it because you'll just keep putting it
Totally.
off because it is uncomfortable.
Yeah.
You wet
Yeah.
your pants. It's not fun doing work with wet pants. It's uncomfortable. So when you have a deadline, it forces you. We all know this. We
Yeah.
all went through school like, oh, we always had the intention, I'm going to study every day. I'm going to do this. And then lo and behold, the exam's in a couple of days. And now we're cramming, right? When the deadline's there, we get it done, right? Or you got patience. You have intentions to write up your reports and clean up your charts. And then all of a sudden you see them in your schedule tomorrow. And now tonight you're going to do it the night before. Deadlines mean something. And so that's the commitment part. When I say commit, it's because there's a deadline and people are relying on you and you can't really say no. And then you'll develop the capabilities, but you need the courage to commit. And then it becomes a fun process.
Yeah.
It can be where you just realize, oh, I'm going to go out of my comfort zone because I want to grow and evolve. And when you look on my business card, I have many credentials. It became a thing where I love to learn. And I see every time I saw it in accounting, CAs and lawyers, they have their credentials. And every time they add a credential, they raise their rate, right? And so I decided every 2 years, I'm going to add a credential. I'm just going to learn stuff, whether it's a certificate, diploma, or degree. And I just keep doing it for the love of learning. And it creates more value. I can bring more value. Because remember, I don't identify as an acupuncturist. I do acupuncture in the room, but I do so much more than just the acupuncture in the room now for my patients. It makes it attractive to the patients and creates value, which they're willing to pay for as well. As I up my game, because again, they just want the solution.
Similarly, I think about being a natural lifelong learner, being curious, always wanting to learn. And I encounter a version of that in people that is a little bit stuck in preparation and not taking action until they've accrued enough credentials to then go, okay, maybe I could try starting now. And I think of this as a process of learning and applying and learning and applying as we go. And there's never a point where we stop learning. We're learning in the process, learning in the doing.
That's that program subconscious that I like to work in my practice: fear of failure, fear of rejection. So learning safe, because everything works in a textbook, right? Learning in theory is always working. And then the applying is the key. And that's part of the learning. And that's the fun part, application.
Yeah.
The Googles, the tech companies, they're always putting out beta versions, right? There's no longer, it's ready. It's here's our beta version, and then update. If you have an electric car or a phone, software updates. Not so that's our world. You're constantly updating yourself. And as you update, you share with your patients. Here's something that I've learned new I'd like to do with you in our session today. Would you like to experience it? And usually the things that I learn or new, I start off going, can I add this to your treatment? And without even charging at the beginning. And then when I see it works, then I can charge for it, because I'm like, oh, I got it in theory and now I'm seeing it in practice. But I always have my people, the patients that are also curious and open, saying, I'm going to do this, but I also want to do this today. And it works out well. But yeah, the application is key. I think what you say, be, do, have was one of the things in your talk, which I've heard also before. I love it. Right action has to follow thinking.
Mhm.
And that's the part of being alive in this world, is to manifest, to do.
Yeah.
But it's the beingness behind the doing that's key. And so that's the development, the inner cultivation, the inner work, the learning. There's so many, we can go so spiritual, which we're out of time, so we won't today. So much you can do, but the beingness is key. Tapping into that presence, tapping into what I think is your higher self,
I
and then
agree.
inspired thought comes through you, which leads to inspired action. It's been my experience. And
Yeah.
so you don't have to, I need to find purpose, I need to do this. If we were to end with anything, what I have learned, it wasn't how I did this all along, but what I have learned and what I would tell my younger self, so I'll share with your audience, is this mindfulness practice, or cultivating this inner work and cleaning up these old programs, the imposter and not good enough, cleaning that up, finding tools and process to clean this up, because you become that clear vessel where, as I mentioned, inspired thought will come through you. You'll get tapped by the universe that will lead you into that inspired action. So rather than, oh, I need to do something, ego Lorne, I just waiting, present, and then all of a sudden something, a coincidence, synchronicity happens, or an inspired idea comes through me. And I just know it now. I'm like, oh, I've been called to do something. I'm ready to do it. Right. And so
Yeah.
to me, it's the inner work that I would tell my younger self: clean your vessel up, get rid of all these old programs that don't serve you, all these junk energy, these beliefs that aren't serving you. Find ways and process to do your inner work, and you become that vessel, and then you'll take it into the world. And it's been what's working for me and the people I work with and people I meet, which is why I resonated with you, Carlin, as I thought you do that inner work is what I believe based on what you taught. And what you taught were those principles and processes to do it.
Yeah.
And that's why I wanted to talk to you more today.
Well, thank you. That's really, I feel very seen and so appreciate that, because I don't think I've really talked to you a lot about the work I do with Activate Vitality, but it's true. I work with occupational therapists. I would certainly take other practitioners, but the niche chose me. These occupational therapists keep coming. And actually we've narrowed down to occupational therapy business owners, because they're seeking community, seeking connection, investing in their development. And that tricky bit about meeting them where they're asking for support is that they're often looking for business support, like that kind of more technical, but it's all the inner work that I know makes the difference. How we're responding to the stressors and the questions and the everyday and the doubt and the fear. And when we get stuck, that's the stuff we work on very deeply. And yeah, we'll problem solve too, but most of the time it's coming down to where there are some emotions and thoughts getting in the way, and how do we realign and find that intention and meaning and purpose so that we can commit and move forward with peeing our pants. I don't usually use that phrase, but that idea that it is dang scary and it's important, and we're going to find a way to move.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
somebody said, what do you do when you feel fear? I go, I pee my pants. And then what? And then I do it with wet pants.
Thank you so much, Lauren. I really appreciate you being here. Best way for people to connect with you.
Two ways. There's
Just,
multiple ways, but
yeah.
I would say lornebrown.com, LORNE, has, because it links to my healthy seminars, my clinic, the mind body stuff, and also the book I wrote. As I mentioned,
Mm.
again, the niche it's called Missing the Point: Why Acupuncturists Fail and What They Need to Know to Succeed. It's an entrepreneurial type book. But again, anybody, OTs, physiotherapists, naturopaths, widgets. Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It's the principles that are in this that matter. And so lornebrown.com is a great way to see all the things that I'm involved in and find my social media handles.
Okay.
And AccuBalance, that's in Vancouver, is my clinic. So both ways will find me.
Wonderful. I will post those in the show notes.
All right.
Thanks, Lorne. The piece that keeps coming back to me from this conversation is Lorne's reframe around fear. He doesn't experience less fear than the rest of us. He just doesn't let fear mean no. Instead, fear becomes information that he currently lacks capability and confidence in that area, which he can then develop through commitment and courage. That shift from I'm scared, so I shouldn't do this, to I'm scared, so I commit and we'll figure this out changes everything. It transforms fear from a stop sign to a roadmap. And his point about clearing your vessel through inner work, cleaning up those old programs of not being good enough, that's the real work. The technical skills matter, but it's the inner work that determines whether we actually use those skills to create something meaningful. If this conversation stirred something up in you, come share it in the Brave OT Facebook group. I'd love to hear what resonated the most and where you're feeling called to commit before you feel confident. If you're feeling like you need some support in this area, this is what I do. This is what the Activate Vitality program is all about. It's about building community that helps you make those brave moves, move forward, undo some of those internal things that are getting in your way. I love it. If you found value in the episode, please take a moment to rate and review the podcast. Your support helps other practitioners find these conversations when they need them the most. Until next time, remember that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's what you find because you have fear. As always, be brave, OTs.